What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
And welcome back to you too, Nick. You were in Vegas last week, UFC 285. Just give us a glimpse on how the trip was. Obviously, went out there to support and train with our boy, Martinez, but you got to meet some pretty cool people in the process, right?
Oh, yeah. I got a ton of stories to tell. You know, stories that I will remember for a lifetime that all happened last week. You know, everything from the weight cut process to the going to the PI every night to train and, you know, just staying in the Fighters Hotel. It was New York for this one. And, you know, you're literally inside the fight world. You're inside the pinnacle of what mixed martial arts has to offer. The UFC is the top dog for many reasons. And, you know, I could go on and on. You know, I've been talking to you guys' ears off ever since I got home, just about all the different things I got to experience, helping somebody get ready for their fights, all, you know, the ups and downs of fight week, all the different emotions. It's definitely a whirlwind of, like, you know, a week, to say the least. You know, I met some amazing people. You know, oddly enough, this was like a major card. So most of the time, if you're going out to help somebody get ready for a fight, it might be, you know, a fight night, or it might be a card that's not so big. But this was 285. This was the biggest card that 2023's had to offer yet. And Jon Jones's return was one of those things that everybody wanted to see. So I felt like this was like a big fight week, and it lived up to that. I mean, all the fights, in my opinion, had major fight feel to them. You know, you got Valentina going in there to try to defend her belt for the 8th time, which would have given her the final ruby, the 8th ruby on her octagon, you know, as far as the belts go.
Yeah.
You know, ever since they started doing the new belts, and of course that gets derailed. You know, meeting some of the people, Alexa Grasso and all the other fighters were, most of them were just so friendly, so nice. And even during one of the roughest weeks that a fighter can experience, which is fight week and basically weight cut week, all of them were so friendly, you know, all the way up to the main event, the man himself, the man who the card was built around, Jon Jones. I got to spend a lot of time with Jon at the PI, and that was like a surreal moment. It was almost like a pinch me moment. I almost didn't believe where I was. I'm sitting there in the UFC PI cold plunge with Jon Jones, convincing Jon to get in, and the only other person convincing Jon Jones to get in with me is David Goggins. He's standing there hanging out while everybody's cutting weight, and he's dropping little motivational tidbits here and there on people, and just having a good time with us. So I thought that was all super cool. Maybe we'll do another podcast, and I can just it'll be like story time where I can just, you know, literally give you all these different stories of people I ran into. Gervonta Davis was in there for one of the nights at the PI, just hanging out, watching the fighters do what they do, and scheduling an appointment to get himself in there. So we'll do a story time maybe next week or something like that. But yeah, the Jon Jones thing was definitely amazing. You know, sitting in there, you know, sweating out with him in the sauna and, you know, doing the cold plunge with him. It was just, it was a surreal moment.
Well, it sounds like a once-in-a-lifetime kind of opportunity and experience, and it is one of those pinch-me things where you're sitting there talking to the greatest mixed martial artist of all time, and I think that fact is pretty solidified after what happened in the fight against Cyril Gane. And
sure,
the person who's encouraging him to get into the cold plunge, in addition to you, is David Goggins, who you didn't even know he was going to be there. But ultimately, you were there for Monoboy, and it didn't end up going his way. But I thought his fight against Cameron Simon was a great fight. He showed a lot of heart. He showed a lot of progress. And for a young man who's had a coach that's passed away, and then the situation at Glory with James Krause, and now he's back home in Houston. This was his first camp at Main Street with Bob Perez. I think there's a bright future. He's now 2-2 in the UFC, and I think things do look up for Monoboy.
Yeah, Mono definitely, you know, you want to get those wins every time you go out there, and the UFC is the most difficult organization you can fight for, and to be 2-2 is very impressive, something he should be very proud of. But, you know, he has that champion mindset. He wants to be the best in the world, and he wants to be able to prove that to the people. And I you know, obviously some things didn't go his way in the fight, and 3 of the fouls that took place were kind of rough on him. You know, after the fight, his eye looked like he, you know, a big cat had scratched him up because he was just clawed up. His whole entire eye was clawed up. And then, you know, the 2 low blows that were heard ringing throughout of all of Las Vegas. those were pretty bad. And those can kind of just zap your energy and zap your mindset. You can be in the zone and feeling yourself and really in the fight. And then something like that happens and you have to take a minute or 2 minutes off to, recalibrate. That can really just like kill your momentum. It can kill all the thoughts that you did have going in, all the reading that you were doing of your opponent. So I know that sort of stuff plagues the sport. Injuries and fouls tend to plague the sport. And in my opinion, when you've got a habitual offender as far as fouls go, you have to be a little bit more strict on them rather than somebody who never gets foul called on them. If you're in there in every fight, you're getting a point taken because of some form of an illegal blow, they either need to tell you a little bit more about the rule set that you're fighting under, or, they need to be a little bit more harsh with the points that they do take. But, no point in getting all, bunched up about that. The fight didn't go our way, and, it's on to the next one. I think Monoboy has such a bright future, and Cameron Simon, for that matter, has a bright future as well. I mean, the kid showed that he's got great kicks, he's got good skills, and he's an energetic fella. So, hats off to him. I think beating Monoboy is no easy feat, and he was able to get his hand raised. So, yeah, it was a good fight. But the whole entire card, in my opinion, was pretty stacked up. I mean, the whole thing looked really good, and then in my opinion, most every fight delivered, especially when you get up into the main event or the main card, with the Shavkat Rakhmonov thing, which, by the way, he's like the most stoic creature ever. Like seeing him all fight week in the PI and then, just all over the hotel and everything. He just seems like the type of silent assassin that you kind of get the vibe off of when you're watching the UFC. You see him out there and just like there's no emotion. He's just walking everybody down. When he's doing something, it always looks like he's on a mission. So that definitely comes through inside and outside the octagon.
Definitely, and I think that was a great suggestion that you made to let's like shelve your time in Vegas conversation for now. But what I want to do is put up like a community post on YouTube like, hey guys, Nick may go live. We could do it either on Instagram or TikTok or even on YouTube itself, and say he's going to answer questions about the Vegas experience. If you have any questions or about anybody he met, drop it below and we can try to get to it. So that's something we could maybe consider doing later this week or next week. Yeah. And then we can just kind of get right into the amazing fights themselves, because I mean, we had the return of the GOAT, Jon Jones, 3 years off, a lot of questions. The last few fights that Jon had leading up to his hiatus were very close. Yeah. A lot of people thought that he lost to Dominic Reyes here in Houston, and a lot of people were pretty upset about that decision. He came back and said, look, let me remind you guys just exactly who I am. Cyril Gane is a guy who went 5 rounds with Francis Ngannou. That fight was uber close. If it weren't for a few mistakes by Gane, he probably could have won that fight. Jon walked in there and made him look like he was a first-day white belt on the mats as far as taking him down and submitting him goes. What do you make of Jon's performance? Because there was a lot of questions coming into it, and there's really no questions coming out of it.
Yeah, no, Jon Jones is the GOAT. You're not going to find somebody who just has that champion mindset more than Jon Jones. And, I have never met Jon prior to this week, but I can tell you for sure, once I met him and we were chilling in the PI and sort of just getting to talk to him and getting to sort of feel him out, I was like, oh God, this dude is operating on a different frequency. And above all, I feel like Jon Jones has truly matured as a fighter, as a human. And, I can only go off the clips I used to watch of him, but man, he was just so likable, so fun to be around. One of those guys, somebody that seems like they've spent their entire life, with other guys in the locker room having fun. And, he can go back and forth with that sort of stuff. And, I was always a fan of Jon Jones, but after getting to hang out with him for a meaningful period of time, I was like, I'm full-blown Team Jones. I think he's the GOAT. I think the way that he carries himself, especially now in this stage of his career, is a very mature, very just buttoned-up fighter and buttoned-up human being. He was, speaking to all the guys that were cutting weight. And I know Jon wasn't cutting weight, but he did go in there and he said he wanted to suffer a little bit with the guys that did have to truly suffer with the weight cut. And he kind of brought this positive energy into the PI when he came in and started sweating with us. And given these kids that are, maybe lower on the cards, or this is one of their first fights in the UFC, some words of encouragement and just sort of letting them feel some love from somebody that everybody in the MMA world looks up to. It was really cool, and I felt like Jon Jones is not just doing this for his own just recognition. He's not doing this for all of that. He's doing this because he truly wants to be the greatest in the world, and he truly loves this sport. He's passionate about it, and not only passionate about it for his own career, but passionate for all the other people. Like, he knows the type of influence that he's had on these young fighters and these people watching the sport. And I think he realizes that now and is trying to uphold his duty of being like a mentor and somebody that people can really look up to as a hero and to a guideline for how to conduct yourself. Man, Jon Jones has had a lot of hiccups in his life, but truly, I think this is a new phase for Jon. I think these 3 years was exactly what he needed to do to try to grow his body into a strong heavyweight. He did that. He proved that he's able to compete at the highest level of heavyweight, and not only do it, but do it flawlessly against somebody who we thought was going to give him a little bit of trouble, but turns out Cyril Gane had absolutely nothing for him. And I believe even if they did stand up and strike a little bit more, that Jon would have pieced him up. I think Jon looked so good all week. I think he was strong. He was mentally right where he needed to be. And all in all, just nothing but high praise for Jon. And, there was a couple other amazing fights on the card, a couple of upsets. Everybody kind of assumed Jon was going to win this fight, but I don't think anybody assumed Alexa Grasso was going to go in there and take the belt from Valentina. So I think that's one that we definitely should touch on right now because
no doubt.
Because everybody I was talking to, Vegas is a big gambling world, big gambling city. Everybody goes, dude, all of my parlays were ruined when Valentina. A lot of people lost a lot of money on Valentina because she was the sure thing. And Alexa Grasso said not so fast, had to come in there and get the third title for the country of Mexico, which was pretty awesome.
The only thing that's constant in the sport of MMA seems to be change. And at some point, no matter how good you are, no matter how dominant you are, the proverbial guard is going to change. And that's exactly what happened. So many good things to say about Alexa Grasso's performance. Boxing was outstanding. We've come to see from the Mexican fighters that their boxing, their hands are really crisp, really good. Their striking game all around is really good. I was very surprised to see Valentina seemingly not want to strike with Alexa and going for a lot of takedowns and trying to win this fight on the ground, which is something that almost never happens with Valentina Shevchenko. She would prefer to stand right on the feet and knock you out and piece you up. This was not the case in this particular fight. So to force an elite level striker, somebody who's been competing in Muay Thai since she was a little girl, to want to shoot on you and go for a discipline that she kind of ascertained later in life and not stick with her bread and butter really speaks to how good Alexa Grasso's striking actually really is. And then I think what truly won her the fight was her doing her homework and reading the tendencies. Obviously, somewhere, and if there's a clip that I saw on Instagram today of Alexa Grasso in the back with a training partner. The training partner was doing that spinning back kick, and she was shooting in and taking the back right as the back of the training partner was being exposed, which is exactly, it reminded me of Conor McGregor working that left hand, that jump back left hand that took Jose Aldo out when he won the belt all those years ago. It was a similar sort of situation. She was working that exact movement, that exact technique in the back before she walked out, and she landed it flawlessly. The first few times Valentina threw that spinning back kick, Alexa just kind of stepped back and got a read for it. Stepped back 2 or 3 times, and she was like, okay, you know what? Now I feel like I can time this spin kick, and when she does it again, I'm going to grab the back. And the veracity with which she grabbed the back and then jumped and put those 2 hooks in and sunk in that rear naked choke shows that she's not just a great boxer, not just a great striker. Her submission game is coming along really well. I just think Mexican MMA over the next decade as a whole, with Yair Rodriguez, Brandon Moreno, now Alexa Grasso, a performance institute being built in Mexico, that we're going to see a massive influx of champions and really good fighters coming from Central America and specifically Mexico, because they have the fighting spirit, they have the heart, they have the hands, and now they're putting together the rest of the game.
Yeah, and not only the nation gets behind them, but I feel like the entire Latin world gets behind
no
these
doubt.
fighters, and it's really something awesome to see. And Alexa Grasso, one thing that sticks out to me is the seizing your opportunity. And obviously this is a big one. You're going out there for the world title fight. That's a big opportunity. But she took every inch that she was given in that fight. And Valentina's so hard to beat. She's so good everywhere. But she knew, as I knew personally, and me and Crew Bob were talking about this, as soon as she threw that spin and Alexa jumped on it, Bob looks at me and goes, "Oh, they've been practicing that one." And that was before we'd even seen the pre-fight stuff where they were practicing it before. As soon as we saw her spin and then she jumped that damn back take and got her hooks and everything, we're like, "Oh my God, she practiced that whole thing." And then Valentina fell for it. Valentina's so good at spinning, and she usually does it in every fight, so it's to be expected. But it's very hard to take advantage of it because she usually spins so fast, and she does it when she knows she's in a safe place inside the cage and inside the fight to do it.
And it's a risk. You don't want to step right into a knockout or a devastating body kick.
Right. And, sometimes fighters will throw a secondary spin, a secondary strike on a spin. They might throw a kick and then there's a fist coming right behind it. So Alexa Grasso definitely did her homework on that. The game plan was really good. You have to go in there and outbox Valentina. You got to go dirty box with her. You got to make this ugly. Straight ones and twos down the pipe. Valentina is very good with her Muay Thai movement. She's very patient. She knows exactly what she's doing as far as the ranges and the striking goes. But, man, Alexa Grasso bit down on the mouthpiece, came in with straight, powerful punches, and was able to start making Valentina respect her power so much that Valentina started looking for takedowns. And Valentina is very good on the ground. She can move on the ground and submit people just as good as anybody in the women's flyweight or any of the divisions for the women. But Alexa Grasso jumped that back take, and I don't know if y'all saw that picture of the jawline, but Valentina's face was like red.
She was about to be missing some teeth if she didn't tap.
I'm colorblind, and I could see the top of her face was red, and then the bottom had this line on it. So I don't even know if the rear naked choke was fully under the chin. It didn't look like it was, but it looked like she was crushing her jaw. And if she didn't tap, then something bad would have happened. So while it killed Valentina to tap, I know that was the right move. You go out on your shield, and nobody, thinks that Valentina is a slouch now that she lost one fight. I mean, she's been the queen of all women's fighting for a very long time. And in my opinion, she will probably be the favorite and will likely get her hand raised in the rematch, which she absolutely deserves. But Alexa Grasso, it was her night, and she did exactly what she needed to do. The only thing is you can't take that exact same game plan in on Valentina for part two, because Valentina will go study. She knows exactly how to make the improvements and make the adjustments to go get her hand raised. And I was saying it afterwards. I feel bad for whoever has to step in the cage and step into the training room for Valentina for this next camp going forward, because she's going to be a woman on a mission, and she's going to be trying to take everybody's head off leading up to the next fight. And Alexa Grasso's the champ now, credit to her, but I think she's got a very tough first title defense on her hands.
But no doubt about that. And Valentina's notoriously rough in the training room. Like, we know some people that have trained with her that have said just like, she does not hold punch. She likes to spar with men, and she expects them to go, 40 to 50%, but she puts that headgear on and those elbow pads, and she unloads on you. Yeah. So I think going forward, it's going to be even worse for her training partners, and I don't envy them, because even though she's a 125-pound woman, she can definitely do some damage. For sure. And I guarantee you, we won't see that spinning kick in the rematch. What we're going to see is a totally different Valentina. I wouldn't be surprised if Valentina doesn't try to exclusively strike to grapple, strike to get in, because she seemed to have, at one point, I thought she was going to finish the fight when she got that crucifix position and was unloading shots, because she's notorious for hitting that crucifix position and then finishing opponents with basically unanswered shots, because you're isolating both of the arms of your opponent, and then they have no recourse to defend their face, and then a referee standing over has to, they don't have any choice but to stop the fight if you can't defend yourself and you're just taking unanswered blows to the face. So for a second there, I was like, oh man, Valentina may finish with one of her signature crucifixes, but Alexa Grasso is just one tough cookie. She scrambled, she shrimped, she bridged, she did everything you learn on the first day of jiu-jitsu class masterfully, and she got herself out of it, got back to her feet, and was putting that left hand on Valentina. And that was really important, because if you don't hit Valentina with something that hurts her and make her respect your striking, you are very quickly going to turn into a heavy bag. And many a woman who stepped in there with Valentina Shevchenko have been a makeshift heavy bag for her to tee off on. And so credit to Grasso. And then moving right into Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Geoff Neal. I mean, this was fight of the night. This was the 50 grand fight of the night. Dana White said so. I say so. Everybody we were watching at the house with said, yeah, no doubt about it. Geoff Neal, yes, he missed weight, and almost never do you get a bonus if you miss weight. Dana White said, F that. Geoff Neal's getting his bonus. I don't care how much overweight he was. That was a fight for the ages. I think a couple takeaways. Shavkat Rakhmonov has a chin like you wouldn't believe. He's got a heart and willingness to win like you wouldn't believe. He can pull a submission out of his ass to win a fight. I mean, that was just pure willpower and determination. On the flip side of that, I think we have to be fair and a little bit critical. Shavkat Rakhmonov needs to work a little bit on his head movement. He was standing right in front of Geoff Neal taking big shots, a few more of those, and he may have found himself on the wrong side of a TKO loss. So I think if Shavkat, he's now called out Colby Covington, he wants that title fight, and I think he's a future champion for sure. But if I'm going to give one point of criticism, if I can criticize the guy that's 17-0 with all finishes, it would be that he needs to move that head a little more, get it off the center line, because you won't have a long career standing right in the center and taking shots down the pipe.
Yeah, and he might be able to survive a few more fights like that, but it's an accumulation. If you continue to get hit by big power punchers and people who know how to strike really well, fight after fight after fight, by the time you fight 3 or 4 or 5 more times in the UFC, you might get a little bit chinny. You might start getting dropped by these shots. And, Geoff Neal hits real hard. And, I gave Geoff a big hug yesterday before we all headed off to the airport. And I was like, man, great performance. I know you didn't get your hand raised, but thank you for that one. That was like a fight for the ages. And he was just like, man, glad you enjoyed it. It's one of those things. I'm glad that he did get the $50K bonus. I understand that the weight cutting portion is a bit of a blemish on the record, but that doesn't really matter, man. He came in there to fight. I know how hard he was trying to pull the weight out this time, and it was a tough battle before the real battle. And Shavkat Rakhmonov is a tough card to draw, but Geoff Neal's not in this to try to take easy fights. He wants to test himself against the best, and I think that performance, even though he didn't get his hand raised, proved to us that Geoff Neal can absolutely hang with everybody in the welterweight division, even the future champion, the likely future champion, Shavkat. And, man, Shavkat all week just looked like a man on the mission. Like I said, him and his entire team, they all kind of have this same stoic, just vibe about them. And they walk everywhere with a purpose, and they aren't really there to play games or joke around or anything like that.
Did you say they walk in a single file line
behind
they do. Shavkat?
Yeah, they all kind of stick right behind him. And Shavkat's big too. I don't know if he looks
big.
Yeah.
I've never seen him in person, but he looks big on TV.
Very, very big. I would have guessed probably 6'2".
Wow.
Very tall, and just leaned out and looked really good. All week, I was assuming he was probably going to get his hand raised, but Geoff is just such a good guy, very friendly and just does it all right. So I was hoping Geoff Neal would have a great performance, but I knew Shavkat was going to be hard to deal with, and that bulldog stand-up choke was about as brutal as it gets. Shavkat's one of those dudes that can finish the fight anywhere, on the ground with submissions, on the feet with striking, and apparently on the feet with submissions now. So I guess since when you're 8-8 with knockouts and submissions, and you need to figure out, obviously one of these two is going to get lopsided. So what's the best thing I can do? I can choke him out on the feet and sort of even it back out until I get my next fight and do a knockout. But yeah, Shavkat's the real deal. I think he does need to move his head a little bit more, but who am I to criticize or critique anybody like that? I mean, he's literally a perfect fighter as of right now. And Colby Covington's a good matchup for him. Colby's a great fighter, will help Shavkat get to that next level, that star level that he's trying to get to. But Colby doesn't hit quite as hard as Geoff Neal. He doesn't quite have the power. He has great power, and he has stamina for days. He's got great wrestling and stuff like that, but he's not going to hit quite as hard. So I think Shavkat would be able to go the distance with Colby, and with that sort of striking that he's got, plus the ground game that he's able to use, I think he'd be trouble for Colby. And I think the odds on that fight would be very, very close. It wouldn't be one I'd want to bet on, because I think Colby can beat anybody in the world, but after Saturday, I think Shavkat can absolutely do the same.
Yeah, and you know what would be really interesting to see is whether they do that one as a 3 or a 5 round fight, like if it was like a fight night main event or something like that. And the reason I say that is because Shavkat did look a little exhausted at the end of that fight with Geoff. Yeah. And if you got to go 5 with Colby, if he can even steal one of the first 3, you're hard pressed to beat Colby Covington in rounds 4 and 5 with the pace and the volume that he keeps on you. But I think it's super interesting. I'd love to see it. You know, we were watching with our other brother, Chris, we were watching the weigh-ins, and he was saying that one of the interesting things about Shavkat that you pick up on at the ceremonial weigh-ins, and then we went back and watched a few prior to see if he did the same thing, is when his opponent and he square off and Dana White's in the middle, he almost gives this little smirk. It's like very subtle, but you have to look for it. And it's almost, if I could surmise that smirk into words, it's I know and you know that I'm going to finish you in this fight. And it's like it's scary, beautiful, perfect, and it sums up Shavkat Rakhmonov all in one. I think he's a future champion. As I said, he's only 28 years old. I think Covington's a great next fight. He said he wants Covington or a title fight. Title fight's not going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen with Bilal Muhammad. We've got to sort out Usman versus Leon now, and who knows if Kamaru grabs the belt back, do they put Leon back in there? I think it kind of depends on how that fight goes. And so I think that Covington was a good call out. Obviously, every fighter, especially one that's undefeated and finishing everybody in the UFC, is going to want that title shot. But dropping the name Covington, I think, was a very wise thing for Rakhmonov to do and sign me up for that fight.
Yeah, and it'll keep him busy, and it'll keep him in people's minds if he's able to fight again, maybe late summer or something like that. And then, you know, who knows, maybe there will be an opportunity if he's able to get his hand raised at the end of this year to fight for a title. And you're right, you know, that sort of smirk is definitely intimidating when you see it. Almost as intimidating as Jake Gyllenhaal up there on the stage, which, you know.
Yeah, what the hell was that about?
Yeah, you know, fight week for the UFC is unlike anything in the world. And if you get to experience it, go do it. It's coming from somebody who just got to experience their first one. It is truly eye-opening, mind-blowing. You're hanging out with people that you never thought you'd hang out with in your life. And, you know, it's truly amazing. But, you know, there's also some weird stuff that happens, and this 285 particularly was an extra weird one. You know, you had, like I said, David Goggins was hanging out with us all night in the PI, and Gervonta Davis came to watch, you know, everybody train and you know, just sort of tour around the PI. And then we go to the weigh-ins, the ceremonial weigh-ins, and Conor McGregor walks out right after, you know, right before the whole thing starts. And he's like, please stick around because I'm filming a shot for my new movie, Roadhouse, you know, part 2 or whatever it is, the remake. And we got Jake Gyllenhaal squaring off against, you know, his opponent in my new film. So he had a hat on and everything, like he was like a producer for a movie. And, you know, he's throwing out hats and doing whatever it is he's got to do.
Being Conor McGregor.
Yeah, Conor was doing Conor, and he was in rare form. But, you know, it was so funny because the weigh-ins ended, and then they usher out this new backdrop, which is UFC 222, which wasn't.
I guess we'll have to see why in the movie it's specifically 222.
Yeah, well, I guess maybe it's a dated thing. They don't want it anywhere near what. But it was Dalton Elwood or whatever Jake Gyllenhaal's name was versus his opponent, like Jax Harris or something like that. So it was hilarious because they come out and they do their weigh-in, and, you know, Jake Gyllenhaal looks like he's on all the juice that Hollywood can afford to give him. And, you know, all actors want to be tough guys, and tough guys want to be actors too. But Jake Gyllenhaal, you could tell he really wanted to live that tough guy moment. And he does his little walkout, and John Anik's just sitting there like a professional on the microphone, doing it just like a UFC fight. I guess they didn't have the budget to throw Joe Rogan in on that one. Which
Rogan in his fanny pack left the stage
before
Anik got out there.
Yeah. Rogan's like, I'm not a part of this. But Dana White stayed up there to be in the middle of the square off. And, you know, the little slap was pretty weak. And I think they realized that. So once they finished shooting the scene, right, then Conor comes back out. Thank you all so much. We're going to run take 2 on this one. So be sure to stick around. And at that point, everybody's just ushering themselves out.
Like,
so,
we've seen enough of this.
Yeah, we'll sit for one of your takes, but we're not doing another one. And so
beat Michael Chandler and maybe we'll stay for 2 takes.
Exactly. So that was maybe the weirdest moment. I'm sitting there with my coach, Crew Bob, and he's like, man, I've experienced a lot of things in the UFC, fight weeks and all that stuff, but this might be the weirdest thing I've ever experienced. He's like, I don't know what I'm watching right now. You got they had the trailer up and everything about this fight, and all the striking in it looked so fake and just like sus, and it was hilarious. But at the same time, I was just like, what am I even watching? I don't really know what's going on. One thing I will say that's pretty cool is the UFC fans that did stick around and watch the fake weigh-in for the movie, they cheered and booed just like how they wanted him to. They wanted Jake Gyllenhaal to get the big cheer, right? And they wanted his opponent to get booed. And as soon as the guy walks out, the whole crowd, MGM Grand, the Garden Arena is just, everybody is just booing this guy. And I thought it was hilarious, man. I thought it was just like one of the weirdest things I've ever experienced. This was one of the most unique weeks of my entire life, but that reigns like supreme as one of the weirdest things I've ever seen.
Well, and Bob's, I think he's cornered almost 80 UFC events at this point. So to say it was one of the weirdest things he's ever seen, I mean, that's saying a lot. Right. Now, I am a Patrick Swayze fan. May he rest in peace, one of my favorite actors. And I have seen Roadhouse a handful of times. I don't recall him fighting MMA in the original Roadhouse. I recall him bouncing a sketchy bar and trying to clean up the place. So I think this might be a very, and I definitely don't remember any Irish dudes that were kind of angry and drinking whiskey in the movie either. So I'm interested to see what they remake. Obviously, I love Conor. Jake Gyllenhaal's a great actor, and I'm excited to see the movie. Anything that the UFC is involved in movie-wise, I will check out. But I just say I'm cautiously optimistic, and I hope they don't ruin a Patrick Swayze classic.
Yeah, I think that I'll be checking this movie out because how can you not, especially when you're an extra in a sense. I know I will absolutely not be on the screen, but I was in the crowd for the
booing
for
Jax Harris. Yeah.
Exactly. So I'll check it out. I mean, it might be one of those cringy movies, cringy remakes that doesn't quite live up to the hype. But, if Conor McGregor's doing something, people are willing to check in, even if it's just producing a movie. And that was definitely a strange moment, but I thought it was pretty cool how the UFC fans, partook in what was going on. And I think it's actually kind of interesting that a Hollywood movie is utilizing like a bare bones realistic situation. And I was sitting there thinking, like, talk about a scene of a movie that's going to be leaked all over the world. I mean, I had my phone. I was entitled to film it. Everybody's filming it. And maybe that's part of the publicity for it. Maybe they're going to try to put it out there and be like, this is like the most, look at this scene from the movie and push it out there, because one scene's not going to tell you the whole story of the movie. But the fact that there's like 5,000 people in the arena filming this on their phones while Jake Gyllenhaal's doing his thing is like, now there's a bunch of people invested in seeing what this movie is going to be about, and then they're also posting it on their social media to gain some more hype on it. So I think it's pretty fascinating. And
not only do we know what happened at the weigh-ins, I think we saw the result of the fight on Instagram as well. Jake Gyllenhaal is the middleweight. What's his name in the movie?
Jackson something Harris or something.
We'll just go with Jake Gyllenhaal. Yeah. We know that Jake Gyllenhaal is the middleweight champion of the world, and he wins by flying knee. So I guess they're giving away little bits and pieces. And I guess if you wanted to be truthfully realistic, at a weigh-in, people are recording. They have their cameras and their phones out. So if you, just like Jon Jones and Cyril, when they came out, people were recording. If you wanted to feel and look realistic, you got to be You got to have people on their phones recording the weigh-ins, because it is 2023, and very, very interesting situation there. But hey, look, anything that brings eyes to MMA, it's our favorite sport, so I'm down for it.
Yeah, for sure. I think more people will be attracted to the sport, and they might see this thing happen, and then one thing leads to the next. Now they're a fan of the UFC. And, obviously a pay-per-view card is always going to feel like, one of the most massive things that the UFC can do, especially one with like a return of Jon Jones or a Conor McGregor or Izzy Adesanya fight. But I feel like every one of these fight weeks is getting, even more intense, and we're kind of revving up into the year, into UFC International Fight Week. And I feel like, last week set a great tone for the month of March. And, we got another great card this week. And I actually saw both Merab and Petr Yan in the PI a lot last week. They've both been out in Vegas for, I guess, a few weeks now, getting themselves ready and acclimated. And both of them look good. Petr Yan up against, he was obviously working a lot of cage work because Merab's going to be trying to push the fight over there. So I think this is going to be an awesome fight. And if I guess we'll lightly do a little prediction on it, but, Petr Yan is so good when the fight, when he can dictate where the fight goes and if it's a 5-round fight. Merab can beat pretty much anybody and everybody in 3 rounds, but he doesn't have quite the submission skills to get him out of there in 3 rounds, but he can steal rounds 1 and 2 while he's still dry and able to grapple and just, put you up against the cage. And then round 3, you're playing catch up. And so he's, really not in any danger or worries. But 5 rounds is where Petr Yan really starts to shine. Those late 3rd, 4th, and 5th rounds is when Petr Yan's striking just, turns up all the way. So I'm excited to see this one because, early on, I think Merab's going to take the fight, and then I think there's going to be a changing of the tides. I think Petr Yan's going to come on strong because I don't see Merab finishing Petr early. So I think this is going to be an interesting fight. And, like I said, I saw both of them getting in their work this week while they were at the PI, and Petr looks real tough. He was in there, doing the ice bath with us and saunaing and everything like that as well. So dude looks like he's ready for this. He called for the Merab fight, so everybody knows how hard how hard of a fight Merab is and how nobody was calling him out. But Petr Yan's trying to do that to prove to everybody that he is still maybe the best bantamweight in the world.
Yeah, well, Merab is such a hard guy to beat, but he doesn't have a lot of wins by finish. He's a decision guy. I think he's on like an 8-fight win streak right now, and I believe he's got like 16 or 17 victories, but 11 of them I think have come by way of judges' decision. Yeah. So, and one thing we know about Petr Yan is he's a lights out striker who comes on late in the fight. Now, Aljo, what's interesting to me as far as this fight goes are the odds. Petr Yan's a 2.5 to 1 favorite. I feel like it should be a little bit closer than that. I almost would have, if you didn't show me the odds and just said, what do you think the odds makers have Dvalishvili versus Petr Yan at? I would have said this is probably a pick'em fight. Maybe Peter's just a slight, like maybe a minus 150 favorite and Merab's like a plus 105. Just a very slight underdog, but it's actually a bigger gap than I would have expected. Now, it's and I think people are factoring in exactly what you said, which is that Merab probably will win the first 2 rounds, especially given the fact that Aljo was able to take Petr down and hold him down and kind of have his way with him. I think Merab, in certain ways, I don't think he's as good of a submission artist as Aljo is, but I think he's a better wrestler than Aljo is. So I think that he will get his takedowns on Petr and probably will be able to hold him for long enough in the first 2 rounds to win those rounds. But come late round 3, if he hasn't finished him, which I don't think he will, Petr Yan's going to come on with those kicks. He's going to have downloaded the data. He's going to be sweaty. Merab is going to be sweaty. He's going to be able to defend those takedowns a little bit better. And then if you are a takedown specialist, because Merab's a decent striker, but that's not what he's known for by any stretch of the imagination. So if you're a wrestler who is now in a situation where you can't take down a lights-out striker, it can be a very long 2.5 rounds for you. So I'm going to pick Petr Yan to win this fight. I just am a little bit surprised by the odds. That's all.
Yeah, I think they've got it right in some regards, but I think Merab Dvalishvili, if you like to gamble on fights, this is a good one because there's some good money to be made for him, and he's Aljamain's number 1 training partner. If there's anybody that knows how to beat Petr Yan, it's Aljamain. And Aljo is always in the training room with Merab. He's always helping him, and he felt him. He knows exactly where Peter's best at. Now, nobody's as good of a human backpack as Aljamain Sterling, but Merab's very good at controlling the fight up against the cage and even bringing you down a few times in the round to score those takedowns, maintain control, and stay just busy enough to not get stood up or separated. So I think Merab, man, he's real good, and if he can gas you out, if you try like hell to get up time and time again in the first 3 rounds, you're going to be exhausted for the late rounds, and that might slow Petr down enough to where Merab doesn't have to worry as much about his striking later in the fight. And Peter's great with kicks, but everybody knows if you kick at a wrestler anything above the waist, the chances of getting caught and even letting them, they'll even eat one just to catch it, are pretty high, and they like to get a hold of your leg any way possible. So if you're willing to give it to them, they like that even more. So I think this is a very interesting fight. I think this is going to have a lot of like number one contender type of vibes to it, and the best man's going to get their hand raised, but I'm not completely sold yet that Petr Yan should be the big favorite in this, and I'm also not completely sold that Merab Dvalishvili is going to have his way with them in the early parts. That's just what I'm assuming right now. So I see this fight probably going the distance, and I think it's going to be a split decision type of thing where one judge might have 3 rounds for Yan, one might have it for Merab, and then we just sort of see what the other one says. But I think this is going to be a very competitive match, and I think after seeing both of them train this past week, you're going to get a very, very high level of MMA.
Yeah, this is the highest level, and bantamweight is just so good. I mean, it's the best division in the sport right now, most exciting, deepest division in my opinion,
most skilled.
Yeah, and to have these two guys going in there on a fight night on the heels of a pay-per-view card and then following up the week after another pay-per-view card. March feels like Christmas for us MMA fans. Mm-hmm. And speaking of us MMA fans, there's 2 fighters with the last name Nurmagomedov that are also fighting this weekend, one related to Khabib, one not. Saeed is going to be taking on a young man by the name of Jonathan Martinez on that same Dvalishvili versus Petr Yan card. And then I always make Umar. Is it Umar or Usman? Which one is in Bellator?
I think Usman.
So Usman is going to be fighting Benson Henderson for the belt in Bellator, the 155 belt. 24 years old, defending his belt for the first time. Seems like the Nurmagomedov legacy is just carrying on exactly where Khabib left it. So I'm excited for both of those fights. Obviously, Benson Henderson is a more known and tougher opponent than Jonathan Martinez, but I'm kind of looking for 2 Nurmagomedov victories this weekend.
Yeah, for sure. And Benson's been around the block for forever, and people know he's a great fighter, but he's also a big name, especially over in Bellator. And it just seems fitting for him to get another title shot in Bellator. And I think that, you know, they're trying to build some of these guys over in Bellator, and they don't want to take former UFC fighters anymore. They really do want to create their own stable of guys who come up, and that sort of creates this, you know, allure and illusion that Bellator is the same level as the UFC, not a level of slightly under where former UFC fighters
They're not taking the UFC cast-offs anymore. They're building their own stable of fighters.
Right, and you know, if they keep looking for these guys that are on the come up like a Nurmagomedov, they'll be able to take some of the best talent in the world truly and keep them you know, under their banner, and that person will never go to the UFC, and that will lead to fans going, well, how would Usman Nurmagomedov do in the UFC, because he might be better than everybody else. But if we've seen somebody in the UFC that didn't quite make it go over to Bellator and now they're the champ, look at like Ryan Bader, for example, you start to go, okay, well, there's a step down from the UFC to Bellator, and he's able to dominate over there, but he wasn't even able to, you know,
grab the belt over here.
Right. So I think that was a smart move for Bellator. I think there's some great fights. I don't see Benson Henderson giving him much, you know, these days. Benson's so
he's been around the block.
Yeah, he's just been around the block so long, and he's a great fighter. He's a legend, but I think the reason he's in there is the name recognition. I think they want to build Nurmagomedov off of the biggest names that they can possibly give him in Bellator, and there's almost nobody in Bellator bigger than Benson Henderson.
Yeah, and you see what Umar's doing in the UFC in the bantamweight division, which we just talked about being the best division in the entire sport, certainly in the UFC as a whole. So to see him doing that, and then Usman rather, dominating Bellator with the belt, it does make you wonder. You know, it's a bad comparison because Makhachev is the 155 champion in the UFC. But if he were, let's say Volkanovski were to win that decision, you say, okay, well, you got Usman over here and you got Volkanovski over there, who's and Nurmagomedov's only 24 years old. So where will the conversation be 2 or 3 years from now? So I think Bellator in the beginning, they really, to build a name, they had to get those UFC, the older fighters, the ones that had been cut, that had a bigger name, that had a good run, but things kind of went south for them, and then they ended up getting cut, so that they could build these names off of them. Right. But now they've got these people that are these excellent fighters. They recruit extremely well out of Europe. They recruit extremely well out of the Middle East and in the Dagestani stable. You know, you've got some Nurmagomedovs over there. You've got Fedor's camp, Vadim Nemkov, and some of those guys that are extremely tough. Great fighters, great champions. So Bellator has the stable to where you can look champ by champ. And I still think the UFC probably would take it by about 75 or 80%. But there's a few in there where you say, hey, you know what? That guy could be the champ in the UFC.
Yeah, for sure. And look, I guess the UFC's card this weekend has a lot of bantamweights on it. You know, I saw while I was in the PI, Davey Grant and Rafael Assunção.
Oh, nice.
Both great guys. Super friendly, super relatable, just down-to-earth human beings that are, I believe they're going to put on an awesome fight next weekend.
Yeah, that should be a good one.
Jon Dvalishvili. I think, you know, Davey Grant, such a good guy, you know, real friendly. Even in the last couple days of his training camp, just out there to be a good guy. And Rafael Assunção too. We chatted it up about ice baths and cold plunges for like 45 minutes. We're both doing like 20 minutes in the hot tub and then like 5 minutes in the cold plunge, and we're just kind of bouncing back and forth. All this cold plunge stuff is relatively new to everybody, right? We're all kind of learning all this same information that's being put out there by like the Andrew Hubermans and all these types of people. So we're all kind of nerding out on that sort of talk, and it was a lot of fun. But I think the bantamweights are really going to shine on this fight night, Dvalishvili versus Jon.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
Nothing's going to happen to either of those guys. They both looked as healthy as can be. But I think that the reason they did that is in case anything does happen to any of the bantamweights on these cards, they can shuffle them around real quick and you know, salvage the card up as much as possible. But I do think that the number one contender at bantamweight is going to be realized once we see Merab Dvalishvili and Petr Yan, which would be a little interesting too, because if Merab gets his hand raised, Aljo, is the champ, and he said he's not going to try to fight Aljo. He'll just wait until Aljo's time is done, and then he'll go over and take the belt when his time's ready. But how long do you want to just sit as a number one contender? You know, they're obviously letting Sean sort of sit there and wait until they can have some sort of resolution at the very top. Is Henry Cejudo coming back or whatever? But I think that this is a great fight. I think Merab has the capabilities to beat somebody like a former champ like Jan, and Jan also has that skill set to go right back to the top of the mountain that he's already been to before.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm picking. I guess we can go ahead and just quickly pick. I'll go Petr Yan and both Nurmagomedovs. I think Benson Henderson is going to suffer defeat, and I think this young man Jonathan Martinez is a tough opponent. But I mean, Saeed's at the top of the food chain for 135.
Yeah. I think Saeed gets. I think Usman gets Benson Henderson out, and I think Saeed also gets his opponent out there, probably by submissions. I'm gonna say rear naked chokes for both of them. But I think for the main event of the UFC, I'm gonna probably go Petr Yan split decision. It's going to be razor thin. I truly see this fight going the distance. All 5 rounds. He's going to come on strong towards the end. Merab's going to steal the first 2 rounds, and Peter's going to come back and win the next 3.
I'll go Jan unanimous decision. I think it's going to be pretty clear 48-47. I think Jan's going to win 3-4-5, and I think Merab's going to grab the first 2, maybe even 49-46, just depending on how that second round goes. But it's going to be interesting. And this is a different format for us. We've had a few people ask for us to sit down and do longer form content. Obviously, you just got back from the PI, once in a lifetime experience. So we had to sit down and talk about that like in a little bit more of an informal setting. So guys, drop us a comment and let us know what you think about this longer form. Obviously, we'll clip certain parts of this up so we can still get you guys those classic 5 to 8 minute videos that we always do. But let us know what you think about this format as well, and if you'd like to see more of this. And Nick, anything else? Welcome back from Vegas. Do you have anything else to say?
Thank you, brother. I guess I'll just say, if you have any questions, if you want to know anything about the trip to the trip to the UFC, the trip through Vegas all week, the fight weeks, the ups and downs, anything you have, send them my way in the comments. I'll be sure to look at them, and we'll answer them to the best of my abilities. There's a lot of fun things that happen. I can tell you stories literally for a week. I don't want to hold you that long, but if you've got questions, let us know, and I'll put it in the next video for sure. It'll be a lot of fun.
Cool. And guys, as always, thanks so much for watching. And if you haven't already, like, subscribe, and drop a comment on this video, and we will see you next time.
Peace.